Nobody tells you that trusting the right feeling can still put you in the wrong house. I didn't understand that all at once. It came to me slowly, in pieces I kept finding reasons to explain away, because I was 63 years old, recently retired, and for the first time since my wife passed, I had let myself be happy again. Her name was Renata, and for 11 months, I believed she was the answer to a question I'd stopped asking. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For those of you just joining me, my name is Walter Kowalski. I spent 38 years running a family hardware and lumber supply company outside Erie, Pennsylvania, the kind of business my father started in a rented garage, and I grew into 3 locations before I handed the keys to my son last spring. We're Polish-American, 3 generations in the same corner of Pennsylvania, and in our family, blood means something you show up for, not something you talk about. My late wife Doreen and I raised 2 kids in the same house on 12th Street for 31 years. Sunday dinner was pierogi and kielbasa, and my mother-in-law, God rest her, would still be rolling dough at 81 if her hands had let her. My daughter Carol lives 20 minutes away and shows up unannounced more often than she calls first, and that's just how we are, loud, close, and nothing done halfway. So when I tell you I met Renata at a church rummage sale 8 months after Doreen's funeral, and that within 4 months I was more myself than I'd been in years, understand what that means coming from a man my age who'd buried the only woman he'd ever loved. I don't fall easily. I hadn't looked at another woman in 33 years of marriage, and I wasn't looking for one now. But Renata felt different from the first conversation. She walked up to my folding table of second-hand tools, wearing a cardigan the color of rust, and she asked me real questions, not polite ones about restoring an old cedar chest her grandmother left her. My daughter Carol was working the bake sale table 20 feet away, and I watched her watch me laugh with a stranger for the first time in 9 months, and I saw something loosen in her shoulders, like relief. We saw each other for 11 months. She met my family early. By month 2, she was at Sunday dinner, and by month 4 she knew not to sit in my late father-in-law's chair at the head of the table, the one nobody sits in, out of respect. My family took to her the way our family takes to people we like, which is to say completely, and with a great deal of food involved. I asked her to marry me on the overlook at Presque Isle, on a Tuesday evening in early autumn, no crowd, just the 2 of us and the lake going gold. Ring, the whole thing. She said yes before I finished the sentence. My daughter cried when I called her. My son said, "Good. Now bring her to dinner so Grandma Jo can feed her properly." To this day, I don't know how I let myself be that happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And I had no idea what was coming. Welcome to the channel, family. Settle in. This one's going to take you somewhere. Hit the like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. Trust me, you'll be glad you stayed for this one. Here's what I want you to understand about Renata before anything else. She wasn't cold. She wasn't distant. She was warm, funny, and she made me feel, every single day, like I hadn't missed my chance at being loved again. So when the subject of her family came up, and it came up early, because in my world family comes up early, her answer didn't feel like a red flag. It felt like a wound. "My parents and I don't speak," she told me one evening, about 7 weeks in. We were on her back porch in Mill Creek, 2 mugs of coffee going cold between us. They were hard people, my father especially. Controlling, never satisfied with anything I did. I had to put states between us, just to become a person. She even said she'd stopped using her maiden name years ago, just to make it harder for them to find her, to give herself room to breathe. I looked at her. She wasn't performing. Her eyes were steady but tired, the look of someone repeating something they'd made peace with a long time ago, even if saying it out loud still cost her something. "I'm sorry," I said. "What else can you say?" "It's fine. I just don't like to talk about it much. They won't be at the wedding. I need you to understand that." I told her it didn't matter to me, and I meant it because I trusted her. She hadn't given me any reason not to. What I hadn't fully accounted for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Renata, they weren't, not remotely. But the Kowalskis operate on a particular frequency, and that frequency includes a deep need to know the people connected to the people we love. It isn't nosiness. It isn't judgment. We just believe you understand a person better once you understand where they came from, who raised them, and whose table they sat at as a kid. And by the ninth month of our engagement, the silence around Renata's family had started making its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in late October. Grandma Joe had made her golabki, the real recipe, the one that takes most of Saturday. Everyone was around the table: me, Renata, my son Mark and his wife, my daughter Carol, and my brother-in-law Denny, who has never once in his life needed an invitation to speak his mind. Dinner was going fine until Denny set down his fork and looked at Renata. "Renata, honey, I gotta ask you something." She smiled. "Sure, Denny. Where's your people?" The table went quiet the way it does when someone says the thing everyone's been carefully avoiding. Renata's smile held, but her eyes flickered, just slightly. "My parents and I aren't in touch. I've mentioned that. I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it." Denny wasn't trying to be cruel. He was just being Denny. Because, in our family, and I say this with love, you don't marry into a family you've never laid eyes on. It isn't how we do things. Denny. My voice, one low word. He picked his fork back up. But the question was already on the table, and no amount of golubki was burying it. Later that night, after Renata had gone home, my son found me in the kitchen. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and leaned against the counter. "She's a good woman," he said. "Not a question." "She is. I believe her." He nodded slowly. "But Dad, we're going to be standing in a church. We're going to make promises in front of God and everyone we know. And we're going to do it without ever meeting a single person from her family. Her parents were hard on her. I believe that." He set his glass down. "I'm sure they were. But hard people still exist somewhere. They've got an address, Dad." He looked at me straight. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into." I didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder and went back to the dining room. I stood in that kitchen a long time after that. But here's what I need you to understand. I still wasn't suspicious. Not of Renata. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the thought I couldn't shake, the one that kept surfacing the whole drive back to my house, was this: what if her parents look at me and decide I'm not what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds, coming from a man who built 3 stores from nothing. But Renata moved in a very specific world: regional sales director for a medical device company, a condo on the bluff with a view of the lake, friends who talked about wine regions and ski trips to Aspen. Her place looked like something out of a catalog. Her friends wore labels I had to look up. She carried herself with a polish that I found attractive, but that sometimes, quietly, made me feel like I was too loud, too blue-collar, too much Denny at the dinner table. What if her parents were the same? What if they had money, standards, expectations I couldn't guess at? What if they took one look at me, and Renata saw herself through their eyes, and something shifted? That was my real fear. Driving north on Route 19 the following Saturday morning in November. Not that I'd uncover a lie. Not that anything was wrong. I thought I was going to meet people who might not think I was good enough. I was going to show up, take what they gave me, and try to convince them I was the man their daughter had chosen. Honestly, I thought I was the underdog in this story. Finding her parents didn't take a private investigator. It took a routine, tedious piece of paperwork. Renata had moved into a rental property my son now manages for a family friend, and since we were getting married in a few weeks, our attorney needed her formal signature on the lease renewal for the estate transfer. I was at Mark's office on a Thursday afternoon when his assistant dropped the processed file on the desk in front of me. I looked down at the government ID she'd uploaded to the portal. Renata Marie Sokolsky. Not Voss, the name she used with my friends and on her social media. Sokolsky. Out of pure curiosity, I ran a quick property search under that name. A few clicks turned up an old public record, a dormant Facebook profile untouched since college, and a home address on Larchmont Drive in a town called Union City, about 90 minutes south. The following Saturday, I told Renata I had a lumber delivery to check on at one of the old store sites. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. The whole drive down, I ran through introductions in my head, quietly dreading the moment someone opened a door and looked at me like I wasn't what they'd pictured. I got off the highway and into Union City just before 10 in the morning. I followed the GPS into a neighborhood of modest ranch homes, clean sidewalks, American flags on porches, the kind of place where people know their neighbors by name and wave from the driveway. I slowed down. There it was, a tidy little ranch house with a flower bed along the walkway and a wind chime on the porch. And in the front yard, moving slowly with a garden hose, was an older man in a Pittsburgh Steelers t-shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering the flower bed with the unhurried patience of someone who had nowhere more important to be. This isn't what I pictured. I sat in the car a full 5 minutes, recalibrating everything. No gate, no fancy car in the driveway. Nothing here suggested these people had spent 1 second of their lives worrying about whether someone else was good enough. These weren't intimidating people. These were plain, ordinary people. And for one unmistakable moment, I felt real relief. I got out and walked up the path. He saw me when I was about 10 feet away and narrowed his eyes with that cautious look people get when a stranger approaches. "Can I help you with something?" I stopped, took a breath. "Sir, you don't know me. My name's Walter Kowalski. I'm engaged to your daughter, Renata." Frank Sokolsky dropped the hose. Not fumbled it, just let it go. Water ran slowly across the driveway while he stared at me, and his face did something I wasn't prepared for at all. It broke. Not with anger, not with suspicion, but with relief. 2 years of accumulated grief finally finding somewhere to land. "Marion," his voice cracked on the name. "Marion, come out here." And in that instant, standing on the walkway of a house in Union City, watching a retired mill inspector try to compose himself, my understanding of the whole situation turned completely upside down. Inside the Sokolsky house, everything I thought I knew about Renata started to come apart. Quietly, methodically, over coffee I hadn't asked for and a plate of shortbread, Marion sat down with shaking hands. The house was clean and modest and completely full of Renata. School pictures, birthday photos, a prom picture on the mantel, a college graduation portrait where Frank and Marion stood on either side of her, beaming, Frank's arm around her shoulders, Marion's face so proud it almost hurt to look at. These were not the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. The story came out carefully. Frank had put in 32 years at the steel mill before it closed, then finished out his career as a plant inspector. Marion had worked the front office at Union City Elementary for most of Renata's childhood. They'd helped put her through Penn State. Full scholarship, no debt to her parents. They were proud of that, deeply proud. When Renata moved to Erie and started building her career, things changed slowly. Calls got shorter, visits stopped. She started showing up in photos online under a different name, Voss, her mother's maiden name, at events with people Frank and Marion didn't recognize, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the conversation about the wedding, the ask for $85,000. Frank's counteroffer, heavy with disappointment, of $12,000, everything they could give without wrecking their retirement. Renata's response, "If you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it," blocked that same night. Marion slid something across the table, a sealed birthday card, stamped, "Return to sender," in red ink. Renata's handwriting on the return address label. Their address. I stared at that red stamp on the envelope, then slowly pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the text Renata had sent me the night before, the one I'd read right before falling asleep, the one that had put me on this drive in the first place. "Honey, wonderful news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything and want to have lunch with you before they head out of town. I can't wait for you to finally meet them." The kitchen went very quiet. I looked up slowly. Frank and Marion Sokolsky sat right across from me, completely unaware of the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Marion read it, set the phone down gently, and said nothing. Frank looked out the kitchen window toward the flower bed he'd been watering when I pulled up. I thought about the drive down, my rehearsed introductions, my quiet fear of not being good enough for these people. I almost laughed. I almost laughed because I'd spent weeks worried Renata's parents would look down on me, that they'd be too refined, too wealthy, too particular. And here they were in Union City, in a ranch house on Larchmont Drive, with a wind chime, a garden hose, and 2 years of unopened birthday cards. The person who decided somebody wasn't good enough wasn't them, it was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who'd driven down Route 19 nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man who drove back to Erie that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is that the great one never breaks character, not even at the table, not even while everything is falling apart. I didn't confront her that night. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I got back to my house a little after 2, sat in my truck for a full 10 minutes, and made a very deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was scared. Not because I doubted what I'd just seen and heard in that kitchen, but because I'm my father's son. And my father told me something once about the moment right before a confrontation that most people get wrong. He said, "Walt, the man who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A lie told all the way through is a confession." I let myself in. Renata was on the couch with a glass of white wine and her laptop open to a venue website. She looked up and smiled the way she always did, warm, easy, like I was the best part of her day. "How was the site check?" "Good," I said. "Long drive, though. You look tired. Want me to order something?" "I want you to explain why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Union City with our return address stamped on it and marked Reed." That's what I wanted. "Whatever sounds good," I said. I sat down next to her. She leaned her head briefly on my shoulder and went back to looking at photos of the venue. I looked at the screen and saw nothing. On the outside, completely normal. Inside, I was taking the whole thing apart, piece by piece. That night, I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through something complicated. I separated what I knew from what I assumed and built a timeline. As far as I knew, Renata's real last name was Sokolsky. Her parents were Frank and Marion Sokolsky of Union City, Pennsylvania. Alive, present, and heartbroken. They hadn't abused her. They hadn't been controlling or toxic in any way. Frank, Marion, or a single photograph in that house suggested. They'd offered $12,000 toward the wedding, been told it wasn't enough, and been erased from the guest list that same night. As far as I knew, Renata had texted me while sitting in her parents' kitchen telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch, which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie, which meant there was a next floor, which meant somebody existed she planned to bring to that lunch. Who? That was the question I fell asleep trying to answer. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next 3 days, I paid attention differently. Not suspiciously, I was careful about that. I didn't check her phone. I didn't follow her. I just listened. The way you listen once you finally understand that every conversation has been running on 2 levels at once, and you'd only ever been hearing one of them. I noticed she mentioned her boss, a man named Gordon Hale, more than she ever had before. Gordon thinks, casually, that the Whitfield account might close sooner than expected. Apparently his wife, Diane, had been at that same charity gala. Small mentions, nothing alarming. The kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they're trying to get you comfortable with a name before that name has to matter. She'd been getting me used to them. She'd been doing it for weeks, and I'd never noticed. Gordon Hale. I looked him up from my son's office the following Tuesday morning. Door closed. Senior vice president at Renata's company, a wealth management firm headquartered in downtown Erie. His photo on the company website showed a man in his late 50s, silver hair, the kind of ease that only comes from decades of never having to explain himself anywhere. His wife, Diane, turned up in a society column about a hospital fundraiser 2 years back. Polished hair, understated jewelry, the whole picture. A wealthy, respectable couple. Exactly the kind of people you'd want standing next to you if you were trying to convince a traditional working-class family you came from somewhere impressive. There they were. I sat back in my chair and stared at the corporate headshot of the Hales. That's when it hit me that Renata wasn't just a liar. She was trapped inside a prison of her own enormous insecurity. She'd spent a decade reinventing herself in Erie, reshaping her identity to climb a social ladder that my family never cared about but her business world clearly did. When her father wouldn't sacrifice his retirement for 1 day of theater, it wasn't just a financial disagreement to her. In her mind, his modesty threatened the polished illusion of wealth she'd sacrificed so much to build. To keep the lie alive, she hadn't just distanced herself from them. She'd had to erase them completely. And then I thought about what she must have told the Hales to get them to agree to this. Because here's what I know about people like Gordon and Diane Hale. They didn't get where they are by being careless or stupid. For Renata to get them to sit down at a lunch and present themselves as her parents, she had to have given them something that made sense. A coherent story. Something moving enough that two busy, important people would say yes without asking too many questions. What had she told them? I let it sit for 2 days, and Thursday morning my phone buzzed with a reminder Renata had added to our shared calendar. Lunch. Gordon and Diane at the Harborview. Saturday, 12:30 p.m. She'd added a note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, honey. This means everything to me. I stared at that note a long time. Means everything to me. I thought about Marian Sokolsky sliding a sealed birthday card across her kitchen table. I thought about Frank's face when he read that text over my shoulder. Yeah, I bet it does. That Thursday, I called my son from my truck, engine running, parked in the lot below Mark's office. He picked up on the second ring. I need to talk to you. Come by the house. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at my kitchen table in the same house on 12th Street, the same table where Renata had charmed my late wife's china cabinet, where Denny had asked his question, where everything had seemed completely normal 2 weeks earlier. And I laid it all out, every bit of it. Union City, Frank and Marion, the birthday card, the text, Gordon and Diane Hale. My son sat across from me, with his hands folded on the table, and listened without interrupting once. When I finished, the kitchen went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" 4 words. That was it. No lecture, no dramatic reaction. I need to build something bigger than what she's built. My son nodded slowly. And the Sokolskys? I'm going back to Union City after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next. He looked at me steady. And what comes next? A dinner, I said. A real gathering, with the right people in the room. Another pause. Then my son stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, "I'll talk to Carol about the restaurant." That was the whole conversation. My daughter's reaction was a little less contained. She came into the kitchen from the living room, where apparently she'd been listening to the whole thing, which in our house isn't considered eavesdropping, it's just considered being present. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and an expression I can only describe as the specific fury of a woman whose late mother's china had been used to feed a liar. Dad. Renata ate off Grandma Joe's china in this house. I know, Carol. And her mother's sitting in Union City with a birthday card that got sent back unopened. I know. Sweetheart. She stared at me a long moment. Then she crossed the kitchen and put both hands on my face. The move she's been doing since she was 4 years old and wanted my full attention. You fixed it, she said quietly. Not just for you. For them too. Saturday came. The Harborview in downtown Erie is exactly the kind of place where the lighting is designed to make everyone look a little more important than they actually are. Renata had made the reservation. As expected, I arrived 5 minutes early and sat facing the door. They came in together, Renata in the middle, one hand tucked into Gordon Hale's arm, Diane on her other side. Renata looked radiant. Gordon carried himself with the ease of a man who'd never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Diane wore warm smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile, firm handshake. Dad, Renata said, her voice carrying a particular kind of triumph. This is my dad, Gordon, and my mom, Diane. Gordon, Diane. Not Frank, not Marion. Gordon, Diane. I shook both hands. I've heard so much about you both. I hadn't heard about them at all, because they hadn't existed in this role until about a week ago. We sat down, menus opened, and for the next 20 minutes I watched Renata perform with a fluency that, under any other circumstance, would have genuinely impressed me. She laughed at Gordon's remarks, half a beat too fast, referenced shared memories with Diane, mentioned trips, restaurants, family moments, and Diane followed along carefully, the way someone does when they're working from a script they only half memorized. Gordon was smoother. He asked me questions about the hardware business, made sharp comments about the retail lumber market, generally acted like a man who'd done his homework and was determined to be convincing. Everyone was performing. The whole table was a stage, and I sat there eating grilled walleye, being absolutely charming. So, Gordon, I said, setting down my fork with the relaxed calm of a man without a worry in the world. Renata's told me so much about you. Clearly you've had a real presence in her life. Gordon smiled. She's been like family to us. Like family. That's everything. That means so much to me, I said. I looked at Renata when I said it. She smiled that radiant smile back at me. Keep smiling, sweetheart. I'll be honest with you both, I continued, leaning forward slightly, the way I do in negotiations when I want someone to feel like I'm letting them in on something. My family takes things like this seriously. My late wife's mother would never forgive me if we didn't do this right. We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing extravagant. Family, good food, a toast. My kids just need to welcome the people who matter to Renata before we get to the altar. Gordon glanced at Diane. Half a second of silent calculation. We'd be honored, he said. Renata grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. Perfect, I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back, full, radiant, triumphant, the smile of a woman who believes she's won. The trap was already built. She just walked right into it, smiling. If you've been with me a while, drop your comments below. While you're at it, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Over the next 6 days, I moved quietly and carefully. Monday, I drove back to Union City, called Frank from the driveway before I even knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking. We sat at the same kitchen table, same coffee. I told them about the lunch, about Gordon and Diane Hale, about the performance, about the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. Marion's hands went still around her mug. Walter, we don't want to cause a scene. Marion. I looked at her directly. My family is going to stand in a room and welcome anyone who walks through that door as part of our family. She deserves to know who she really is. I paused. And you've spent 2 years sending birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room, not for drama. Because you're her parents, and somebody has to say it out loud. Frank leaned over and covered Marion's hand with his own. He looked at me. What time should we be there? Tuesday, I sat with my son and my brother-in-law Denny in Mark's office and briefed them fully. My son listened, asked 2 sharp questions, then said, I'll handle the restaurant. He picked up the phone and that was the end of it. Denny's reaction required immediate containment. I want to say something at the door, he growled, narrowing his eyes. No, Denny, not one word, I said, putting both hands on his shoulders. I need you to do something that's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Not one word until I stand up for the toast. He looked at the ceiling, then at my son, who was biting the inside of his cheek. Fine, Denny finally hissed. But I want a double order of pierogi before anybody sits down, and I'm holding the door on the way out. I looked at him and nodded. That, I can get you. Every piece was in place. Vitale's. Downtown Erie. My son's choice was a good one, a restaurant that felt like somebody's home, not a stage set. Private back room, white tablecloths, candles, warm light. My daughter handled the menu personally and added a small framed photo of Doreen to the welcome table because as far as she was concerned, her mother needed to be there too. Frank and Marion drove up from Union City Saturday morning and checked into a hotel near the airport. Frank called me Thursday night to confirm. His voice was steady and careful. And at the end of the call, after we'd gone over the details, he said quietly, Walter, whatever happens tomorrow in that room, thank you for driving down to Union City, for knocking on that door. A pause. She chose well, even if she doesn't know it yet. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just told him, see you tomorrow, Frank. I pressed my suit Friday night. I climbed into bed next to Renata, who was already asleep, already dreaming of the version of tomorrow she'd built in her head. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and thought about a man in a Steelers t-shirt watering a flower bed on Larchmont Drive. A sealed birthday card with a red stamp on the front. A kitchen table where 2 people had been quietly waiting 2 years for somebody to finally show up. Somebody was showing up tomorrow. They both were. You can build a lie as tall as you want, but the moment the right people walk through the door, the whole thing comes down. That Saturday morning I woke up with a stillness that doesn't come from peace, it comes from certainty. I lay there a few minutes listening to Renata in the bathroom, the shower, the hair dryer, the particular rhythm of a woman getting ready for a performance she believes she's already won. And I thought about Frank Sokolsky pressing his navy blazer in a hotel room near the airport, Marion, standing in front of a mirror, trying to hold herself together. 2 people who drove 90 minutes down Route 19 for a dinner, Their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited to. Get up, Walt. Let's finish this. Renata took 3 hours to get ready. 3 hours. I sat in the living room watching the highlights with the volume low and let her have every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion. Once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I told her she looked beautiful. Because she did. That was never the problem. The problem was everything underneath the beauty. She wanted to head over early to check the setup. I told her to go ahead, that I had a quick call to make, and I'd meet her there. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door, looking like everything in her life was perfectly arranged. The second the door shut, I picked up my phone and called Frank. He answered on the first ring. You good? I asked. We're ready. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd made a decision. Marion's dressed. We're ready. Good. When I text you, you come in. Doesn't matter what's happening at that table. You just walk in and stand there. You don't have to say a word. A pause. Frank. Yeah. She's going to see you the second that door opens. I know. I just want you to be ready, Walt. His voice stopped me. I've been ready for 2 years. I've been ready since the night she blocked us. I've been ready every birthday of Marion's when the phone never rang. Another pause, shorter. We'll be there. I held the phone a second after he hung up. Then I put on my jacket, checked the ring in my inside pocket, and left. Vitali's on a Saturday night is exactly what it should be. Warm, welcoming, the smell of garlic and rosemary greeting you at the door like an old friend. But the private room in the back runs on a different frequency. Quieter, deliberate, white tablecloths. Low light, round tables arranged so everyone can see each other. My daughter had been there since 4 o'clock. When I walked in at 6:30, she was adjusting the centerpiece flowers with the focused energy of a woman who understands that the details in a room tell people exactly how seriously you're taking this. She looked up when I came in and studied my face the way she has since she was old enough to have something to hide. You okay? I'm okay, Carol. You sure? I'm sure. She crossed the room and put both hands on my face, looked at me a long moment. Grandma Jo used to say, she said quietly, that the truth always finds the most uncomfortable seat in the room, even when nobody invited it. She straightened my collar. Let it sit tonight. I almost lost it right there. Almost. My son was near the bar talking to his brother-in-law, already in his charcoal suit, completely composed. He looked at me when I walked over. One slow nod. That nod said, everything's ready. The room is set. Do what you need to do. Denny sat at a side table with a plate full of pierogi and the focused expression of a man honoring a solemn obligation. He looked at me, pointed at the plate, then pointed at me. His version of, I held up my end. Don't forget yours. I almost smiled. They arrived at 7. I heard Renata's laugh in the hallway before the door even opened. That particular social laugh, half a note higher than her regular one, the one she uses when she wants a room to feel like a party before she's even walked in. She came in first. Navy dress, hair perfect, every detail in place. Gordon Hale followed. Silver-haired, expensive suit, moving with the natural authority of a man who's never doubted his right to be anywhere. Diane beside him, elegant and refined, pearls at her collarbone. Renata moved through that room like she owned it. She kissed my daughter on both cheeks, shook my son's hand with both of hers, laughed at something Diane said near the bar and touched her arm warmly. She was magnificent, genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. When she reached my side, she looped her arm through mine and leaned in. This is perfect, she whispered. Your family is wonderful. This is everything I wanted. I know, I said. That's why I did it. She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat down. Food came out, roasted chicken, short ribs, a spread my daughter had designed herself. Fresh bread wrapped in cloth. The table filled with the warm noise of what looked, from the outside, like a real family dinner. Gordon was charming and attentive, asking my son about the business with what seemed like genuine interest. Diane complimented my daughter on the restaurant choice, and Carol accepted the compliment graciously while privately thinking things I'll never fully know. Renata was radiant, relaxed, victorious. I ate. I laughed at the right moments. I refilled glasses, asked questions, and to anyone watching, I was a completely relaxed man enjoying a family dinner. My phone sat face down in my jacket pocket. I had a text to send. I was waiting for the right moment. That moment came at 7:52, in the short pause between the main course and whatever was supposed to come after. The table was warm, the wine was flowing, and Renata was laughing at something Gordon had said. I took out my phone and typed one word to Frank. Then I stood up, the clink of a knife against a glass, that clean, clear sound that tells a room, stop, listen. The table went still. Renata looked at me with that full, radiant smile. The smile of a woman who thinks the next 60 seconds are going to be a toast about how much he loves her. I let the silence stretch a beat longer than felt comfortable. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. My voice was calm, unhurried. The way my father used to talk when something really mattered to our family. A dinner like this isn't just a nice evening. It's a statement. It's us saying, these people are real. These people matter. We don't say that lightly. I looked slowly around the table. My father-in-law used to tell me that the people you invite into a moment like this tell you exactly who you are. I paused. So, I want to make sure tonight we have the right people at this table. I looked toward Tony, the restaurant manager standing near the back wall. He'd been briefed. He knew his cue. He walked to the side door and opened it, and Frank and Marian Sokolsky walked in. Frank in his navy blazer, the one that didn't fit quite like it used to, the kind you could tell he'd had for years and saved for occasions that mattered. Marian, in a burgundy dress, small purse held with both hands, chin up, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who'd decided she wasn't going to fall apart in public, no matter what happened next. They crossed into the silence of that room, and Renata saw them. I was watching her face. I'd positioned myself specifically to watch her face. The color left it like a tide pulling out fast. Complete, absolute. Her lips parted. Her hand, the one holding her wine glass, went completely still. The glass tilted. I leaned over without looking at her and steadied it. Set it carefully on the linen. She turned to me. Her eyes were doing the fast math of someone trying to find the story that could save her. I could watch it happening in real time, searching for the exit, the angle, the version of this she could still control. Walter. Her voice came out thin, barely there. I went to Union City, I said quietly, not loud, not performing for the room. 3 weeks ago, I drove down Route 19 on a Saturday morning because I told myself, maybe I can fix this for her. Maybe I can give her family back as a wedding gift. I let that land. I found a man watering his flower bed on Larchmont Drive, wearing a Steelers t-shirt. I told him my name, and he dropped the garden hose. The room held its breath. Renata, your father put in 32 years at the mill before it closed. Your mother worked the front office at your elementary school through most of your childhood. They helped put you through Penn State, and they did it without you carrying $1 of debt because they wanted you to have everything. My voice stayed even, steady. They offered you $12,000 from their retirement savings, and you told them if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't exist in it. She opened her mouth. You don't understand everything that happened. When I sat in their kitchen, I said quietly, like a door closing, I saw your school pictures on the refrigerator. I held the birthday card you mailed to our address, unopened. And while I was sitting there, you texted me that your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Gordon and Diane Hale. Diane had both hands flat on the table in front of her, her face completely pale. Gordon had gone entirely still. Gordon, Diane, I said, my voice shifting into something calm and respectful. I know exactly what she told you. That my family was deeply prejudiced, that her real parents had passed away years ago, and that she needed you to stand in as honorary family so she wouldn't have to walk into all this alone. She used your kindness and your standing as a prop to fill 2 empty chairs in a story she built. I gestured toward Frank and Marian, standing near the door. But those are her real parents. Diane looked at Renata, one long, slow look that needed no words because words wouldn't have been enough anyway. Then she looked at Frank and Marian, and something crossed her face that was worse than anger. It was recognition, the specific recognition of a woman who'd just understood that the person she thought she knew didn't exist. Gordon said nothing. He folded his napkin and set it on the table. the gesture of a man who's leaving and has decided there's nothing left worth saying. I turned to Renata one final time. She'd stopped looking for the exit. There wasn't one, and she knew it. She just stared at me, eyes bright, jaw tight. The entire architecture of everything she'd built was reflected in every face in that room. I grew up watching my father-in-law treat everyone: the man who parked the cars, the woman who cleaned the office, the retired mill inspector from Union City who gave everything and was told it wasn't enough, like they mattered. I reached into my jacket pocket. That's the measure I was raised by. Not the address, not the job, not the clothes. I looked at her. By that measure, I don't know who you are. I took the ring out of my pocket, set it down on the white linen in front of her. Not thrown, not dramatic, just placed, quietly, the way you set something down when you've been carrying it too long and you're finally ready to let it go for good. Then I picked up the floral centerpiece from the middle of our table. White flowers, simple, my daughter's choice. And I walked across the room to where Marian Sokolsky stood. She was fighting it. You could see the effort in her jaw, her shoulders, the careful, shallow way she was breathing, the way people breathe when they're holding something enormous and can't afford to drop it in public. I offered her the flowers. She looked at them, looked at me, and then simply came apart. Not a scream, a whisper, the kind that comes after 2 years of accumulated grief finally finding somewhere to land. Frank had his arm around her before the first sound made it out. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet, his chin steady. He pulled her into him and looked at me over the top of her head. Then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped forward. One step. Marian still tucked under his arm, and he offered me his free hand. I shook it. He gripped it hard. The grip of a man saying something his voice still couldn't quite manage. I held it a moment, then stepped back. My son was beside me. I don't know exactly when he'd moved. My son shows up when it matters. It's just what he does. He looked at Frank Sokolsky for a moment, then stepped forward and extended his hand. I'm Mark, he said. I should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry. Frank shook his hand and swallowed once. Frank. A breath. Thank you for raising a man like this. My son glanced at me, just for a second, just long enough. In 35 years, I'd never seen him that proud. My daughter didn't shake Marian's hand. She pulled her into a full hug, both arms, immediate, unconditional, the way our family embraces people who need to be held. Marian held on. The flowers were still in her hands. We walked out together, the Kowalskis and the Sokolskis. My daughter's arm linked through Marian's. My son and Frank walking side by side with the quiet ease of two men who'd just recognized something in each other. Denny bringing up the rear, holding the door like he'd promised. He stopped once at the doorway, only turned around once. I looked back too. Renata was sitting at the center of that table in her perfect dress, in her perfectly constructed life, the ring on the linen in front of her, the centerpiece gone. Gordon and Diane Hale stood at the back of the room. Diane already had her coat on, Gordon's hand at the small of her back, neither one looking at Renata as they moved toward the exit. Her friends, the social circle she'd built, the one she'd performed for and built her entire second identity around, sat frozen in their chairs with the particular discomfort of people who've just witnessed something they can't unsee and don't know what to do with their hands. Nobody went to her. Nobody pulled her aside. Nobody offered a version of events that made her look better. Nobody played the part she needed, because there were no more parts left to play. The whole cast had walked out. She just sat there, finally, irreversibly, seen. Outside, on the sidewalk, in the clean, cold air of a November night, downtown, Erie moved around us like it had no idea what had just happened inside that restaurant. I stood next to my son and took a deep breath. He put his hand on the back of my neck, something he's done since he was a boy. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Grandpa would have done the same thing. That was it. That was all he said. Across the sidewalk, Frank Sokolsky was looking out at the Erie skyline with Marian tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands. Both of them breathing the same cold November air like people who'd just gotten back something they'd stopped hoping to see again. Frank caught me watching. He nodded once. Not a thank you, something there wasn't a word for. I nodded back. Some deals close for profit. Some you close because there's no version of yourself you can live with if you walk away from the table. That night, I closed the most important deal of my life, and I didn't make a single dollar. Some women erase the people who love them to build a life they think looks better. She built an entire world on top of that erasure. And on a Saturday night in November, in the back room of a restaurant in downtown Erie, every floor of it came down. If this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching this from. See you in the next one, family.